Hey, Warriors, welcome to another episode of the Legacy Warrior podcast. As always, I'm here with my partner in crime, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, Warriors.
Man, listen, I want you guys to think about this for a second. Every single day, we're faced with decisions that we don't even know what the outcome long term of those decisions will be. But we're still making these decisions and we're still choosing our heart, which is what this episode is about today. And for me, choosing your heart is a difference between living a life of quiet desperation, living a truly miserable existence where we feel like life is happening to us, or it's really choosing to lean into the moments of growth, to lean into those decisions. And we've all said it like, man, this is a really hard decision to make. And it's bullshit. Like, no, it's not. Your gut and your intuition always tells you the decision that you need to make in the moment based upon what you think is right, based upon what you think your values are, based upon what your purpose in life is. And what I've learned in my own journey is that as we lean into the pain of these experiences that we've had in life, and we really make a commitment to growth, we choose our heart to heal from these things. We choose our heart to elevate from these things. And we choose our heart to use these life experiences as rocket fuel for our future. We really start to live at our full life power and potential. So we're going to really dig into this one today because it's one of my favorite topics. And I know, Stephanie, it's one of your favorite topics. And honestly, guys, just like each one of you listening today, we've had times when we chose what we thought was the easy hard and it led to some regret. And we've had times when we chose what sometimes feels like something that's more hard. But the flip side of that is abundance and joy and happiness and success and all these amazing things that have happened into our life. So I just can't wait to dig into this one.
Yeah, I have to say this definitely this one was Walt's. This is Walt's topic because he feels really strongly about this. I actually do too, but we're a little different on it because he's definitely an action taker. I'm definitely more of a drag my feet before I'm ready to dig in. So
Well, you're like the logical thinker. I'm emotional. Use my gut. Use my instinct. Bam, make a decision. We going. Choosing that hard every time. And you're more the logical. Like, let's really think this out. And so I feel like the reason we work so well together, the reason we're getting ready to have our 24-year anniversary July 3rd, is because we found a great balance between the two, and we rubbed off on each other with that too.
right, we definitely are. We take different approaches on this for sure. Like you just said, it's just we'll look at things a little differently, but it does help because we'll talk through a lot of those things and then go from there, and which usually it has led us to a lot of success. But we're going to share today. We actually have a lot of examples of all areas of your life where you're choosing your heart. And by that, we kind of mean a lot of times we face a choice or we face a decision and we're tempted to do whatever feels good in the moment, and that's typically the temptation. It's usually not the right thing. It's usually what is feels easier at the time, and will be at least a temporary feel good kind of thing. But you have to really ask yourself in those moments, but what is this going to look like down the road? Is this going to be a good decision a couple years from now, or even a couple months from now? Is my future self going to thank me for this decision? And that's where you stop yourself from making those wrong choices or making those things that seem good, but they're really not.
We were talking, one of our men's groups, I go to a church men group every Wednesday. And I think 2 sessions ago, we go about 4 to 6 weeks at a time. And they talked about, it isn't even really about making good or bad decisions. It's about making wise decisions. And would your future self, 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, would your future self thank you for the decision you're making today? And guys, this really goes to every single decision that we make in our life, with our health, with our finances, with our relationships, with our careers. Like, man, we're always faced with these decisions. And sometimes it feels like, and Steph, I know you wanted to touch on the instant gratification world we live in, this microwave society where we want things now, and we're not willing to wait to really earn the things in order to honestly, it just makes you happier when you get them. We're kind of in this throwaway society, and I feel like that accounts for relationships. It accounts for money. It accounts with even the things that we purchase that don't hold up anymore.
Mm.
It accounts for your health, where we can just mask health issues with medication. It accounts
Yeah.
for people who are going through addictions. It accounts for people who really have experienced trauma and they're like, I just pushed it way down. Nobody's ever going to talk to me about it. So I want you to think about, when you're listening to this today, what are the decisions that you're looking to make in your life now? Not just the big ones, because the big ones are easy to say. These are pinnacle, critical, decisional moments in my life.
Mhm.
But all these little decisions we make every single day add up to the direction in which we're headed.
I was gonna say a lot of times those little decisions end up being big things, like because it is the little things we're doing in the everyday that really add up to the big changes. So sometimes what feels like a small choice or a small decision is actually not a small decision. It might feel like it in that moment, but it's not. And I get really passionate about this because I feel like life is all about choices. We're faced with choices every day.
Mhm.
And some of them are stupid little choices like brush my teeth in the morning, what time I get up, stuff like that. But sometimes we have really big choices. And sometimes we don't even realize that those are big choices until later in life. And I have to say, Walt and I, we're at the point where we're in our 40s, we're in our midlife. So we're starting to get a lot of clarity on this and a lot of we can look back. We have so much to look back on that we can compare and we can see all the choices that we made and where it
Mhm.
led us. And like he said, and sometimes that we look back with regret and sometimes we look back and go, dang, that was a really good decision.
But Steph, the only time I feel like that I ever have regret was when I didn't learn the lesson from the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, there's no failure. We
Right.
get so caught up in this failure mentality where we get paralyzed. We don't make a decision, or we just end up making the wrong one out of desperation that we're trying not to make the wrong one for. And we get so caught up in failure that we don't actually learn the lesson from that opportunity we have to grow as human beings and get better and make wiser decisions in the future. So even some of the stuff, the mistakes I made in our marriage, like I don't necessarily regret what I did because I learned from it. I became a better person, a better
Mm-hmm.
husband, a better human being from that. And our relationship is stronger now because of that. So I don't care where you're at on the life journey. I don't care where you're at. I don't care if you wanted to stop drinking and you grabbed a beer today and you drank it. Stephanie just talked about it. Life is about
Mm-hmm.
choices. It's the little choices you make every single day. Your history does not define your legacy, but the decisions that you continue to make, good or bad, will. And Admiral McCraven, he was the Central Command general years ago. He came out with this amazing commencement speech. It's called Make Your Bed. And if you haven't listened to it, really talk
Oh,
about it. And the purpose of the entire thing was, if you want to have a successful life, start by making your bed.
I've heard this
It's
one. Yeah.
something so small and so seemingly trivial. And by the way, guys, Stephanie, I made the bed today, like brownie points. Let's go.
uh,
I made the bed today, but I think even you make the bed every single day. Me, I'm not really a bed maker in general. Like I don't really care if it's made. We're gonna get back in it. But there's such a incredible, even for me to take away at 46 years old, getting the purpose of getting up and making your bed is to start your day. You started your day by completing an action. You started your day by completing a task. If you
Mhm.
take that mentality to everything that you do, there's no downside to making your bed. It's all upside. You
Right.
take that to every single thing that you do and all these decisions that you're going to
Well, it's
make.
like you said, it's that little task. So you do that one little thing, but that starts you on, okay, I accomplished something
Mm-hmm.
already. It's a small task that's already accomplished. And then that leads you to want to accomplish more tasks for the day. So it makes you more productive
Mm-hmm.
in your day. So it feels like it's not really anything, but it actually is. Well,
The
at least for some
micro
of us.
decision, the micro decision equates to major movement in your life. And that's what I want you to think about as we're talking about some of these instances and some of these things that frankly Steph and I have struggled with personally. that we know people who struggle with. And we know that every single one of us out there struggle with. Look, we're human beings. Like there's a lot of similarities in all of our journeys because we're humans. And so we're wired to take on instant gratification versus delayed gratification to get what we think that we want, when really the reality is what we want long term is always built into the choose your hard that you know in your gut you need to make, that you know in your heart you need to make, but that we still toil with because we know it's the road less traveled that's going to get us ultimately where we're going.
Yeah, so I was gonna start by saying, Walt talked a little bit already about delayed gratification because I think a lot of times a lot of times we're faced with choices, and I said it, a lot of times it feels like a temptation. And so, for instance, we were talking about how this is like a microwave society and how everybody wants everything instant. And we've gotten away from learning how to delay our gratification and earn those things instead of just getting them.
Mhm.
And so I was going to say one of the instances I'm talking about is in your finances with credit cards. Credit cards have made it to where we can just go buy something. Whether we can afford it or
Mhm.
not, we just can buy it. And so now we've gotten to where what seemed like a small decision in the moment, like you might have thought, it was a designer pair of jeans you wanted, and you're like, oh, I know I really can't afford them, but I got this credit card. I can pay it later.
Get them Gucci pants.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And so you get those Gucci pants and it feels good at that moment. It's like, ooh, I'm going to be wearing these nice jeans and I'm going to look good. And it feels great at that time
Mhm.
until, it comes a few months later and you kept doing that. You kept seeing things you wanted and you're like, oh, well, I'll pay it later. And eventually you've got $20,000 in credit card debt next thing you know.
Mhm.
And now you're paying interest on that $20,000. And what seemed like, oh, it was just one pair of jeans turned into, oh my God, I don't even know how I put that boat on there. Or,
Yeah.
you know, next thing you know it, I mean, you just got to be bigger and bigger things because it was like, oh, well, screw it. I already have the debt. I'm going to have to pay like whatever. I'm always going to have this
I
payment.
work hard. I deserve this.
Yeah. And the things that you tell yourself to justify it.
Mhm.
And, but really, had you just delayed that gratification a little bit, saved up for the pants and bought them because you earned the money to buy it. And then you can feel good that you had the money to pay for it and you can really wear it and wear it with pride. Actually feels so much better.
Well,
And sorry, go ahead.
don't you think it's like so in the moment that you're still making the decision. I don't even know how much Gucci pants are because Steph and I don't own no Gucci pants, but I'm using that. Let's say they're $1,000 pants. People really spend money like that on things. $1,000 pair of shoes, a $4,000 Louis Vuitton purse, right? A dang
Mm.
$500 fishing reel that you use twice a year. I don't care what it is, right? I couldn't leave you out on that. We'd be spending money too. And you know what I think is in the moment, it's not an easy decision. You're still like, shit, man, like that's a lot of money. But you're looking for the instant gratification because 9 times out of 10, there's an undertone of something that's bothering you. There's stress at work, there's stress in the home, there's not feeling worthy enough. So if you buy this thing, it's going to fill you with joy in the moment, but it's so fleeting and it goes away. It's like the unhealed trauma that we keep pushing away. We're choosing the hard to push that away, and we're choosing the easier choice, which is to buy the Gucci pants or whatever it is instead. It still leaves us feeling very empty. And the snowball negatively that happens to that is exactly what Steph was talking about. So in the moment, you're like, whatever, like I work some overtime, I can pay for that.
Mhm.
But then you buy the next thing and you buy the next thing and and I see this with people who gamble. I see this with people
Mm.
who, I mean, it's crazy. And the
With
next
drinking and with
drinking, the
drugs.
next thing you know, you're literally taking out a consolidation loan because you've got yourself so far into debt. You can't borrow money for the new car. Your car is broke down. You can't borrow money for the new car because your credit's so busted and it's 21%. And
Mhm.
so there's all these negative impacts that happen, even though all you really did at the beginning was choose instant gratification. You chose the easy route, which was to buy those Gucci pants. And you guys out there listening, you know I'm keeping it real right now. And Steph and I, we've always made a decision. We've always thought similarly about money. We've always made the decision to just pay things off. We lived with a couple years ago, and this is a long time, like 20 years ago, when we first got our first places and started living together. We're buying used furniture and we're buying stuff for our house. And I mean, I came from nothing. So it would have been really easy for me. I mean, I was starved for things, never getting anything nice, not getting Christmas presents, growing up very broke, growing up with the trauma that I went through. It would have been really easy to get those things, or it would have been really easy to buy somebody else things because then they would love me more and I would feel better about that. And now I'm getting in debt because I'm purchasing things for somebody else. And we lived with a couple, and back in the day, y'all, they're buying like $100 pairs of jeans at Express, but they can't afford to go in on pizza on Friday night, right? Or
Right.
they can't afford
So
to they can't afford to buy food in the refrigerator. So our half of the fridge of the freezer, our burrito fell on the other side. We're arguing over it, but we're not arguing over the burrito. We're arguing because they're so damn stressed about money because they're struggling to pay their bills because they're looking for the instant gratification to fill a void that they have that they need to remedy outside of purchasing the things and the instant gratification that never leaves them ultimately feeling fulfilled.
right, because you feel like in that moment, oh, this feels good, and I've got this new thing, and it does until the bill comes around, and and then like he said, that feeling is so fleeting. It feels like it's making you feel good temporarily, but it always leaves,
Mm-hmm.
and then you end up just chasing that feeling all the time. But it's never going to get filled by any things is the problem. And so that's why we're saying choose your hard, because we have to realize that when something feels like, oh, that's going to feel really good right now, and it seems like the good thing at that moment, you really need to ask yourself, though, but do I really need that? Is that really going to do anything for me? Is that really going to make me feel better? We have to stop and ask ourselves those things so that we don't just, because if you just go off emotion all the time and you just react in
Mm-hmm.
those moments of, well, I feel low right now and this will make me feel better right now. If we are only thinking about right now, odds are we're going to pay for it later. That's typically kind of my mentality is like, it might feel good right now, but honestly, later it's probably not going to feel good. So those are the moments where we have to, and Walt and I are just as guilty of some of this. Yeah, like
Hey, I like to
we've had
spend money. Don't play.
moments that it was like we really couldn't afford it, but it was like, oh, but we really want that, and we splurged a time or two, and then usually ended up realizing later that was dumb.
Well, I can think about I think about those things when we were a lot younger, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
God, man, you get so much wisdom as you age, if you're really learning the lessons along the way. And I think about when we were younger, and I'll never forget, we drove my car to Philadelphia, where Stephanie's extended family was at from Virginia, and we had splurged on some things. I think we had taken like a little mini, like regional type vacation, nothing crazy, but we really didn't have the money. We didn't have any money saved. We weren't really, we were just straight up living paycheck to paycheck. I think at the time you worked at Walmart in the photo lab, and I was an E4 in the Navy. And my tires got slashed on my car. Do you know I had to do a loan thing from the tire shop to buy to buy new tires? I had to do that because we chose instant gratification at another time. So, and I'm not saying don't go get your nails done. I'm not saying, don't go fishing. We got a Jeep. I just bought some new parts for the Jeep just yesterday. They came in today. So I'm not saying don't enjoy your life too. But I think there's a huge balance.
Well, I think it's like you said, but if you can't pay for your necessities, like you don't have food in your house and you don't have clothes to wear and things like that, the things you
Hmm.
really need, a roof over your head, then you shouldn't be buying designer clothes and
Hmm.
all those things. Like that's where your common sense has to say, this probably isn't a good idea right now.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Sorry, I'm jumping in this one because you just made me really think of this. It reminds me of growing up, and we didn't have food. Like sometimes the only food I ate when I lived with my father was school lunch, free lunch. But he always, always, always had some cigarettes and beer. How that man was able to get cigarettes and beer,
Yeah, exactly.
he would send me to the store to buy nickel candy so I can give them the dollar food stamp and get 95 cents in change and go to 5 or 6 stores to turn around so he could have enough money to buy a 6 pack. That's the kind of decisions for
Oh, and he
him.
ran up a tab at the,
Oh yeah, I'll never forget that. And
but
yeah,
you guys had no food.
how we ever did tabs back then, I don't know. But he ran up a tab, but we just never had any food. Right, we're starving, literally starving with nothing, eating peas and instant mashed potatoes cooked with just water for dinner. I mean, it was so wild for him. He chose what he thought was the hard, which is figuring out how to get booze and cigarettes, because he was so hurt by the trauma he had been through that he had never healed from. That was easier for him than it was having the courage to dig in and do some healing to become a better human being and a better
Well,
father.
that was that instant gratification. Like, this will make me feel good right now. Didn't
Right.
care about the responsibilities.
Nothing else. And it's crazy because the brokest people, and I'm going to piss somebody off who's listening to this, and I hope I do, always got some beer and cigarettes. Somehow, some way, they got some beer and cigarettes, but they broke. They don't have no food. They're crying on the 15th of the month, and and it's everybody else's fault except for their own. It really makes you live a life where you feel like things are happening to you and not for you, and it's a blame game for everybody else. And that type of a life builds regret, and it truly does leave you stuck. My father was stuck where he was at. I mean, literally just barely making it every single month, robbing Peter to pay Paul. You guys have heard that so much. The shell game with bills that we play because we're not willing to make the right decision. We're not willing to choose the hard route that we know is the right route that ultimately will get us out of the debt to free up some financials to give us a little bit of joy so we're not so stressed. I mean, when you choose your heart and it's the right heart, it seems harder in the moment, but damn, like your whole life will transform in front of you quickly too. And then when you think 5 or 10 years from down the line, I mean, your life is transformed. So it's going to go to the left or it's going to go to the right. You get to choose. And the hard you choose is going to dictate what direction that is.
Well, it's funny because I think about our kids right now. We have 2 teenage daughters, and you know, they look at our life now and they don't know what it took us to get where we're at now. They just see us, they see that we take vacations and they see that
Yeah.
we can afford to buy these things that are pretty expensive. And they think that that's normal. And, but all the time I'm telling them, but you didn't see your dad and I in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning when, like he
Struggling.
said, we started out, we moved into an empty apartment and it was like that was like having a clean slate. Like we were just starting with a clean slate. We had nothing, literally had nothing, an empty apartment. Came there with what we could fit in a car and that was it. And then we started to buy things to fill the apartment and it took time and we didn't have a lot of money. So it was a lot of working hard
Mm-hmm.
and paying what we could when we could. And
Using tax refunds
like I
to
said,
pay off
we
furniture.
bought used stuff and, you know, or just cheap things or whatever, just so that we could start having some furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And, but we put those things as a priority. We put furnishing our apartment and having food and paying our bills came first. If we couldn't do that, then we weren't going to do a lot of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't buy a lot of clothing and things like that that weren't necessities at that time. And we delayed that gratification. But I'll have to tell you, because we did that later on down the line, eventually we got our dream house. We've been able to get all the things we were dreaming about and we wanted because we saved in the beginning and we delayed that gratification and we put the things that were necessities first. then. And so this is what we're saying about choosing your heart, and that a lot of people don't see is there's a lot of work that needs to be put in upfront that a lot of times people don't see until later when you got all this stuff, and then they're asking you, how'd you do that?
Well, Steph, isn't it true? Like back then, especially, let's keep using this example of when we were younger before kids. I mean, guys, look, our first entertainment center was 2 cinder blocks with a piece of wood across it so it could hold the TV, at least so it wasn't on the floor. Like the first chairs we had for our apartment were some lawn chairs. Okay. Broke as a joke. I mean, but it was still more money than when I was starving in my first apartment. So, I had upgraded at that point. We missed out sometimes, and not always. We still went out and stuff with friends, but there were times we didn't go out with friends. Like that was hard too. That was hard to miss out a little bit on some fun when other people would take these cool vacations and we didn't go to
We were paying on furniture rather than taking
yeah, like
vacations or going on
we didn't go to Cancun. That sucked. We were in Virginia. We went to Washington D.C. instead. Yay, that's a great trade off. So it was. We still found balance. So it was still hard in the moment not to do the thing that was going to be fun and provide us with these instant gratification moments of just like, oh, they're now we got social media. I could post this cool thing on social media so everybody thinks I'm the coolest, so they like me, so I can get the likes. And meantime, I'm so terrified of getting my bills and whether or not I'm even going to be able to make my light payment or my rent payment or my mortgage payment or whatever. We got to stop living for right now and be constant and consistent in our ability to make wise decisions where we'll think ourselves a year from now, 5 years, 10 from now, years from now. We've also had a really good friend years ago who wouldn't go spend money on anything. She was choosing the hardest hard, and they would save up for all these things because they knew their kids would need braces, and so they'd saving it for all these things. And she literally almost lost her life due to some medical issues, and then figured them out, and she's doing amazing, which I love. But there was no balance there either. So it's really just finding a balance between just enjoying your life, because you do have to enjoy the now too.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think we're not saying don't enjoy now, but it's not enjoying now at the cost of your future at the same time. You got to find the balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so another example we were going to talk about is when I think of is when we were raising our kids, because I see a lot of parents that it's a very difficult job, and it takes a lot of work up front when they're very little. And a lot of parents get lazy, and so they don't feel like having to do the discipline that they know they need to do because they're tired that day, or it's just at that moment it'll feel like, oh, well, right, I'll let it pass this time because they're just feeling tired and they don't want to deal with it.
Or they feel bad because they've been at work and haven't seen their kids, so they just want to love on them and play with them. They don't want to discipline them.
Right. Yeah. Or there's guilt from other things. And so there's different reasons why maybe they don't do it. But the problem is, and you'll see it right away, and we learned it quickly. Like, if you don't address the things that kids do when they do it every time, they're waiting for that moment when you let it slide, and then they continue to do it. And then it gets harder and harder to reel it in. So it's one of those things too, where you have to do that stuff up front when they're really little, because the longer you let it go and you've let the behavior happen, they get used to it, and then they don't take you seriously when you do try to discipline them about it, because they're like, oh, well, you didn't care before. So, and they'll use that every time, believe me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
They
becomes
know no boundaries, or they're constant testing boundaries. That's for sure.
yes. So I know for us, we were really pretty hardcore on having a routine, having discipline, also working in love and fun, and you have to balance it all. But really, like, each time, like, it can be really aggravating. Like, your kid will keep coming in your room and saying, "Oh, can I get a drink of water? Oh, I see monsters under my bed." They'll come up with every excuse under the book of why they don't
I
want to
just
go to
want to
bed.
give you a hug, but kids will play you.
Oh, absolutely. And
They will play you.
Oh, and even when you are consistent and like keep taking them back to their room, you keep taking them back, you don't let
Hmm.
them get in bed with you or whatever it is, um, eventually they'll give in and they stop because they realize they're not going to get by you. And that's how you have to be. And if you're not like that, you're going to find out you're going to deal with it later in a much
Hmm.
bigger way because that child that you didn't put in check, when they were hitting other kids or they're stealing or they're lying about something, if you don't check those things every time in the moment, then you're going to be dealing with a teenager that doesn't respect their teachers, doesn't respect other adults. They're acting out. They think they can take what they want. And
Hmm.
it becomes a much more serious issue than if you had just dealt with it when they were little.
And this doesn't mean you got to be perfect, y'all, right? Like Steph and I are so far from perfect, it's
Oh,
not even
yeah.
funny. This is, I love the Pareto principle for almost everything. Doesn't matter if it's leadership or life or whatever it is. 80% of the time, 90% of the time, right? Pareto principle is 80% of the time you do things one way. It gives you autonomy to have some variable, some variance in it 20% of the time. So I always say like 80, 90% of the time, we were so consistent. Were there times when we were just tired and didn't feel like dealing with it in the moment? It just wasn't worth the argument with our kids in the moment? Sure. But 80, 90% of the time,
Yeah. On the
there were
majority.
they were always testing boundaries, always probing, always seeing what they can get away with. And so 80 to 90% of the
And they
time,
will play off of each parent.
oh, especially when they're teenagers, please, yes. And 80, 90% of the time, it was super consistent, our discipline, right? It also required Stephanie and I to really have some accountability for each other as mom and dad and as husband and wife and our partnership and how we wanted to raise our children too. It required us to back each other up. It required us to support each other. It required us to affirm what the other one said to our kids to ensure that they knew that we had a united front. It was really hard, especially when they were younger, because they had like this boundless energy that they never got tired. Like, God, if we could just someone figure out how to bottle up the energy a little kid has
Oh my
and put
goodness.
that in a 5 hour energy drink, and I'll pay $50 a dang shot of that. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
but what it did was it was harder in the moment than allowing them to get away with whatever they were doing. So we chose our heart in the moment. We chose what felt like the harder route in the moment. But then they'd be 4, 5, 6 years old, and we'd go to people's homes, and I'm like, "Don't touch that," and they wouldn't touch it. Not
Right.
because they were afraid of me, not because they were worried about like these negative consequences. Like they were just trained great little kids. Sometimes would they still touch it? Sure. And I'm like, what I say,
Mm.
boom, right? If I tell you again, you're going to go in timeout. They knew we would put them in timeout immediately there, even if we were someplace else. So it's just getting in the moment, realizing like, what's the wise choice in the moment? What's the outcome going to be 2 years from now if I'm making these choices right now? And when you start to truly do that, you can choose the hard, that's the right thing to catapult and accelerate your life later on. That's what we did with our kids.
Well, when I just want to say this for children. Like we had our certain things that were like they're definitely getting disciplined if they do that. Like if they were to cuss when they're little, we check that every time.
Mhm.
That was never
Mhm.
funny. It was never okay. If they were to hit someone, we
Mhm.
never let that slide. That's never okay.
Unless they were hit first. I mean, Dad, you know what I'm talking about. Then I was like, but never. You always
Yeah.
walk away,
If you got caught lying,
stealing.
those big things that are like, I definitely don't want them doing that. Or there was behaviors I would reinforce like manners. I really wanted them to have manners. So
Mhm.
I was modeling the manners and always saying to them, please do this and thank you for doing that. And I was really intentional about that because I wanted them to do that. And when they did do it well, I always praised them. So
Mhm.
there's certain things that it was like, you just can't let it slide. Now there's things like they would fight me on what they were going to wear. Well, you got to choose your battles. That kind of stuff. I was like, okay, whatever. I don't
But
care.
those things don't affect their value
Right.
system later. I think
Right.
the things
It was the
we were
things
serious
that
was their
were
values, right? And their
yes.
morals. And why we're talking about parenthood and these kind of like family oriented topics, I want to talk about relationships because I think people got to take a step back and say, what am I tolerating in my life from relationships? not even from your kids. And maybe sometimes it's then because your kids are grown or they're teenagers. But I see a lot of people stay in very toxic relationships because the heart of leaving the relationship and being alone feels greater than just staying in the relationship and dealing with all the bullshit that you deal with. But in reality, your confidence is eroding being staying in that narcissistic relationship. Like your self-worth is eroding.
Well, that's where kind of like that comfortable pain. Like you're
Yeah.
staying because that's comfortable, like you know what to expect. So it feels easier, kind of.
Well, you don't believe there's a positive outcome if you do something different and make a change. And I see this. I'm in this dads helping dads group on Facebook. I don't know. It's like 150, 200,000 men in there. There's a lot of men in there. And I see a lot of men in there. They ask about having issues with their spouse or their girlfriend or whoever, right? And you see half these men will jump in and say, leave her, like it's not worth it, get the hell out of there, right? But you're only hearing that man's side of the story. And even if you heard the woman's side of the story, the truth really lies between the two, right? You ever heard there's three sides to a story?
And
One person's part, the other person's part, and the truth.
truth. Hmm.
And you could really see that in this group. I see a lot of relationships crumble and fall, and people get divorced, which creates generational trauma for the kids. And and you could stay together and create generational trauma too. So don't make this about more than what I'm saying. But I see so many people being so willing to give up because their ego, their pride, their pain prevents them from lowering their wall, being vulnerable, having a conversation with their spouse, a real radical, candid conversation, so that you can work on the things that are really affecting your relationship negatively, reach a compromise because you put your pride and your ego down, and then figure out how to lock arms and march forward together. Stephanie and I had to do that in our relationship, and our pride and our ego and hurt and all these things were in the way of us having these conversations until we had to come to Jesus moment and we're on the precipice of getting a divorce. And we realized, man, there's so much love and there's so much intimacy and we're still in love with each other. We're just hurt. And then we had to lower the walls and have these conversations. And when we did, we chose the heart of staying together. That was harder at first than not staying together.
Right. Sometimes it feels easier to just say, I quit. I throw in the towel. I can't control that person. I can't get them to do what I want them to do. I'm
Mm-hmm.
done. It's easier to do that and walk away sometimes. Or sometimes it feels easier to stay because you don't have to really deal with it. It's kind of like, I'll just go through the motions and that feels comfortable and easier. But the thing is, like he's saying, the what feels hard, which is having those conversations
Mm-hmm.
or having to actually share your emotions or your how you really feel about things is can be really difficult for a lot of people. It feels hard to do, but once you do it, it's like that's life changing.
I mean, think about it. You ever had a conversation with somebody at workplace? It doesn't matter where it's at. Just think of one. And you got this inner anxiety behind around having this conversation, and when you're like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something," and
Oh,
like
I
you're
have it all the time because I hate confrontations.
Stephanie has it with herself before we start the podcast every time. And your mouth gets dry and your heart's beating all fast and you feel sweaty under your arm. Like it's really uncomfortable for you to have these conversations. Have you ever finished those things or made the choice that scared the hell out of you and you did it anyway? And there's this elation on the other side of that. There's this joy on the other side of there's like this victory mentality, a mindset on the other side of that. And there's this pride in how you feel about yourself that you did it, even if maybe the conversation didn't turn out how you thought, because the other person is still in ego and pain and pride. There's just this release and this freedom that you can obtain when you're willing to choose the hard that your intuition is telling you to choose. And the moments that Stephanie and I did, that was 12, 13 years ago. Our marriage is extraordinary today. We're July 3rd, we're 24 years married and we're 26 years of being together. We could have very easily been divorced and on second marriages, not having fixed the things within ourselves that we needed to fix and still making the same mistakes in another relationship. We chose the heart of staying together. Our relationship is better now than it's ever been. We had to believe that it could be.
And it wasn't right away. That was a process and a
Right.
journey in
Hmm.
itself that it took several years to get to a really good place where we felt like we worked through those things and we healed our own stuff and we were able to really lock arms and move forward together in a new place. That
Hmm.
took time and effort and energy, and it's not easy,
But it's
but it's
always worth
worth
it,
it.
right? You hear us chiming in together. We need to
Yeah.
plan that right there.
And
But
this is the choose your hard part is either way it's hard. Life's hard. Everything's hard. Honestly, everything's hard. That's why we're saying choose your heart because no matter what, it's going to be hard. If you choose the instant gratification, you're going to pay for it later.
hmm
If you choose to do the work up front and do the hard first, you reap the reward later. So, but generally, if you do the work up front, the hard stuff first, you always get a way better reward in the end.
in every aspect of life, guys, I unequivocally, this is where Stephanie said before, look at your life resume on an episode that we did before, which is super funny. Just so you guys know, I just feel like some person on YouTube was like, what the F is a life resume? And I just couldn't help but laugh and ask them to get in the arena with us. But it was just so if you got those comments, keep them funny. They're fodder for this podcast. And we absolutely think I think they're genuinely really funny to me. And so I think I want to talk a little bit about just this entrepreneurship journey that we're in. It was really hard for me to leave corporate. Look, guys, I was making a couple $100,000 a year in corporate America. It was really hard to leave income like that and go to zero. Scary as hell. I still get scared.
Hmm.
It was hard to say, how the hell am I going
It's
to
still
build this
hard.
speaker business where I get paid to go speak the money that I need to support my family? How am I going to write a memoir? How am I going to, Steph and I, this is the first time we talked about on the podcast. We're gonna getting ready to write a marriage book and a relationship book based upon our quarter of a century of being together. These are hard things that we're doing, but because we're looking at our life outcome in so many different arenas, we understand that choosing the hard that scares you the most, that's the one that leads to the biggest reward on the other side. So if you're sitting out there and you're thinking right now, like, man, there's these, I need to leave this job and I need to go find another one. I'm just not happy where I'm at. I'm not being a good spouse. I'm not being a good parent. I'm not being a good leader. I'm not being a good employee anymore. I just have so much apathy for my role now, but I'm scared because of the economy and I'm scared because of this and I'm scared because of this. So stop allowing the fear to paralyze you of the unknowns that you don't have control for anyway, and step into what you do have control over. And that's creating an environment where you're happy, where you're appreciated. When I left corporate America, I left an environment where I wasn't appreciated anymore. They had given somebody a promotion who was no longer with the company, actually, at this point, by the way. And it was going to get ugly real fast. And I would have lost my professionalism in the moment, I think, or maybe I wouldn't have. I really had to focus on responding to my triggers that he was causing in the moment. What I realized though is it was all a setup, man. It was a setup to do what I'm doing right now. I wasn't meant to go down the path that I was on anymore. So it was hard as hell to accept that. It was hard as hell to say, I'm right on the doorstep of this promotion. And then if we get that, then now, oh my gosh, the next level is just ridiculous. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't being a good husband. I wasn't being a good father. I wasn't being the best version of me. I wasn't being nothing to myself. So guys, look, like choose your heart and then be okay clapping for yourself in the journey because there's no instant gratification in this entrepreneurship journey for freaking sure. Right?
Yeah.
The amount of work we put in.
Yeah. I was gonna say this is an awesome example of choose your hard because Walt was living in the hard. He was miserable at his job and in turn was making us miserable at home because he couldn't let go of what was at work. And so really we were all a little miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that breakdown and then it was like, oh my God, like he walks away from this. This is our main income.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of responsibility. We have 2 children. We had a lot of bills. And it was like, oh my gosh. But in that moment, in some ways, it's like, oh, it's just easier to stay in the job because that's a known income.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's comfortable pain.
right. But then it wasn't, because I mean, he was literally miserable. And so at some point, money's not worth it. It's not worth your peace. It's not worth your inner peace, your inner happiness. Um, that we ended up choosing, well, let's step away from that and let's actually go for what you've always wanted to do. But that was super scary. The unknown of not knowing how that's going to go. We're still in that place. I mean, we're still in this place of, we're working hard and we're trying to build this thing from nothing. And I can't even tell you guys, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work with little to no reward for a while. We're
Hmm.
seeing some rewards, but we invested a lot that we haven't even gotten back yet.
And made
So,
a lot of mistakes along the way and
mhm,
pivoted and adjusted. I love Deion Sanders. For those of you guys who don't know, he's a Hall of Fame NFL cornerback. And he did a speech a while back and he goes, when nobody's clapping for you, keep making plays.
mm.
When nobody's watching, keep making plays.
And that is what it
When
requires.
nobody's doing this, keep making plays. Just keep making plays. And ultimately, those plays turn into a winning season. I'll tell you, I went from getting $0 last year for a speaking engagement to getting over 10 grand to go speak, to having people, buy bulk orders of my memoir. And the best part is it's not even the money, right? I mean, the money just allows us to live. Stephanie got to go on the last trip with me to New York. It was beautiful. It was like our dream come true. But we've been working 18 months when nobody's been clapping for us and nobody's making plays, and we're trying to build a pot. We're doing all these things to try to serve humanity in a profound way and still create a life that we are proud of, that we can live an extraordinary life too. And now we're doing it. So now it's like, I got to keep making plays to build the consistency.
But we're doing it feeling like we know we got to put the work in up front. And at some point, we're going to really reap a reward in multiple ways, probably. We can't see that yet. We've seen a taste. We've
Mm-hmm.
gotten a taste. And let me tell you, it looks pretty damn good.
Got a few tastes.
So, and this is what we're saying about choose your hard, though. Like, we're in that right now. We're literally choosing our hard right now. We're choosing
Mm-hmm.
to put this work in on something that we don't know what's actually going to come of it. It could totally fail. It could flop. We don't know. We're just keep putting our one foot in front of the other and
But
just
you know what we'll never have? Some regret on whether or not it worked. And we've sold 401ks and we've sold the little bit of stock that we have, and we sold our boat, and we sacrificed, and we haven't been taking trips like we normally would. And so like we've downsized our life significantly to chase the dream.
mhm.
You have to make the sacrifice and delay the gratification to chase the dream. You have to be willing to say, I'm worth it. My purpose is worth it. My experiences have created a version of me that the world is ready to hear from. And however you're ready to articulate that to people, and then go all in, choose the hard that leads to the best version of your life. Don't choose the hard that keeps you in the comfortable pain. We've all done it. We've all been there. We've all got the t-shirt of comfortable pain. There's only a small percentage of the population that has the courage to choose the hard that nobody else is willing to do. If you're listening to this podcast and you listen to podcasts, I know you could be in that 5%. You've got to get off the sidelines and get in the damn arena and stop playing small with your life and become the person that God created you to be.
Amen.
Yeah. So, okay. So, how the hell do you even do it? So you're like, whatever, guys, like that sounds really great. Like, I don't even know what to, like, how do I even conceptualize this? So you guys know we love the four keys.
Mhm.
That's our thing. That's our jam. Trademark Ricky Bobby Inc. If you watched Talladega Nights.
Well,
So,
before we even get into the four keys, I just want to say, you out there, what are you holding on to? What are you not doing that you need to do? You know, are you in a job that you hate right now and you know you should leave it? Are you not being the parent you should be being? Are you not being the spouse your significant other needs? What is it that you're facing? Is it you can't give up some addiction? Is it, you can't quit smoking? Is it, gambling? Is it, what are the things that you're You know you shouldn't be putting first, but you are. You need to choose your hard. So I hope through these examples that we've been giving you, I hope you see what we mean by choose your hard. Because like we said, all of it's hard. But the certain hard, if you choose the hard up front, you can reap some really great rewards. So that's what we're going to talk about in the 4 keys is how to go about choosing your hard.
Right. Stop living in regret. Start living at your power, your potential, your purpose, and step into everything that life has for you. You have a choice right now, listening to my voice, listening to Stephanie's voice right now. You have a choice to choose the hard that's going to catapult your life. Don't get to the end of it and have regret because you chose the comfortable path that kept you in the pain that you've always been. And so Steph and I, we have a lot of conversations of when we make decisions now. And when those decisions seem tough, some we internally navigate ourselves, some we actually have some dialogue between each other before we make. And so if get a pen out, this is the 4 keys with how you choose your heart. And so the first thing is having the realization that if you want something different, you have to do something different in your life. If you want something different, you have to do something different. I knew when I was in corporate America, if I didn't do something different, I would continue to be miserable in the situation that I was in. That something different could have been going to get a different job. For me, the something different was really moving into this entrepreneur journey. But I knew that I had to like pivot and make an adjustment from the path that I was on in the moment. I didn't know what it was going to be right away. I just knew it was going to be something. So realize if you want something different, you got to be willing to make the choice to do something different.
Right. Well, and I are in this this space right now where we're like, we really want to lose weight, and we got some of our blood work back, and we didn't like the numbers that we
Mm.
had, and
That they weren't warrior blood work numbers.
so so we're like, well, we can continue to do what we've been doing, which is
Mhm.
not eating well, not getting the exercise we need, and keep putting weight on, or we can choose to start eating healthy, get more exercise. We have to take action and start doing something different, or we're never going to see those results. And we all have this in our life. In some way, we can start taking action if we're not happy with something. We always have a choice. And sometimes this was something I did want to touch on was we do always have a choice. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And sometimes you'll be like, well, but I didn't ask for that to happen to me. I didn't ask for that medical diagnosis. I didn't ask for that. There are things that are totally out of our control, and we can't control other people. We can't control environment. We can't control things that happen to
Mhm.
us. There's things that are going to happen to us. And what it comes down to is how we respond to it. And, we do have a choice about that. We have a choice in how we respond, and we have a choice on how we let it affect us.
Mhm.
And we're choosing that. And Walt's talked about this a lot,
Yeah.
multiple times, about how we re-victimize ourselves. Something that happened to us is long happened in the past. And even the person who did it half the time, they've gone on with their life. It's not affecting them. The only person it's affecting is you because you're still letting it affect you
Mhm.
because you're doing that to yourself. You can choose to move past that and not let it bother you anymore. We always have a choice in that. Even if there's an abuser or someone that's doing something to us, yes, we can't control what they're doing. We can't necessarily stop them. Maybe we can't even escape, but we can choose how it's going to affect us moving forward. There's always a choice. And so, that's what our step 2 we were going into is evaluate what your choices are. What are you deciding between?
Mhm.
Because there's always a choice. I'm telling you guys, it's like when he talked about our marriage and when our marriage went that way. We had a choice. I had a choice to walk away and be like, I'm just done. I had a choice to stay and fight for it and put in the effort, but that required change on my part. I had to change things that I was doing to make my marriage better. If I continued to go the way I was, we wouldn't have a marriage.
Hmm.
And that's a choice I was making. There's always a choice, you guys. So evaluate those choices. There's always pros and cons, and there's always a way that you can
Yep.
change whatever situation you're in, or you can at least change how you let it affect you. That's the biggest thing I can say, because you can't always change the circumstances, but you can change how you let it affect you.
Well, it's crazy. I can't remember who said the quote off the top of my head. I had it in my head a few minutes ago, but you know, life is 1% what happens to you and 99% how you
Mm,
respond to it. And it's really
so
true.
true.
It's really
Yes.
true. I could have responded to my life experiences from when I was younger and the abuse I went through and continued to negatively have the generational cycles that had permeated my family since who knows when, how many generations that goes back to. And, I think about Nelson Mandela. He was in prison for years and he talked about, but they could never put his mentality in a prison, even though physically he was in one. And
Mm,
so he went, and once he was released from created this amazing life of service where he just had such a huge impact that'll last throughout humanity. But he didn't have to go that way. So was his
mm.
experience negative in the moment? Yes. But he got to choose his heart with how he responded to it. And you get to do the same thing. The scariest thing to me that you can ever have in your life is getting to the end of it and being filled with regret. If you There's been books written and articles written on people who are on their deathbed. Nobody ever regrets that they didn't buy the Corvette. Nobody ever regrets that
Hmm.
they didn't take a chance on love. You know what they regret? The times they didn't take a chance on love. They regret not fighting for their marriage and getting divorced and not being there for their kids like they could have. They regret going to work for 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week, and spending their life chasing money when really the experiences with the people that they loved are the ones that they really needed. So you need to be really honest with yourself, not only when you do number two, which is evaluating what your choices are and what you're deciding between, but it's determining the potential outcomes for each. If I would have stayed in corporate America and I would have been so stressed and had a heart attack and died, does anybody care that I'm a vice president? Does anybody care that I was a CEO, let's say? Nobody would care about any, I hope they wouldn't. They would care about how I make them feel. And so, am I willing to choose my heart where I can create the life and the legacy that I really would be proud of at the end, where I don't have a bunch of regrets when I'm laying on my deathbed? Because to me, that's the scariest thing that can ever happen. So, if you're out there listening, start determining the outcomes for these decisions that you're making and really be honest with yourself and don't make the good or bad decision. Make
Yeah.
the wise decision. Make the wise one that you're going to appreciate 1, 3, 5, 10, 15 years from now, that you're going to sit back and be like, man, you know what? Well, thank you for making that decision. Holy shit. It could have went a whole nother kind of way.
Yeah, it makes me think of that. I'm going back to the marriage again, because when I think about the outcome, I was definitely thinking about my kids, because
Hmm.
that decision was not only going to affect he and I, it was going to affect our children. And to me, that was huge. Like, that was probably the biggest reason that I was like, I'm going to stay and fight, because I owe it to my kids. They didn't ask for this. They want both their parents together. They want two loving parents. And so that was a big potential outcome of walking away from the marriage. And so, and we face that with everything. So that leads us to number 4, which is the mentality of being solution oriented, focusing on the solution and outcome versus situation in front of you. And Walt's huge on this. He's very solution oriented, probably more than most people I know. But that's what we're talking about is, guys, it comes down to action and choosing what you know is the right thing to do. That's not usually not the easy thing to do. generally when something's easy, it's not the right thing, because most things that are worth doing aren't easy. And
Say that again for the people in the back.
yeah, most things worth doing are not easy. So keep that in mind when you're making your choices and when you're thinking, oh, like this will feel good right now. But you better ask yourself, is this going to feel good a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because that one drink, that one time of getting high, that that one lie, all those one little thing that seemed like it was nothing, that one Twix bar you decided to eat, those things add up to be life changing. So choose your hard. Don't take that drink today. Start today. Don't get high. Go through the withdrawal. Trust me, it's going to be really hard, but it's going to be really worth it. You will thank yourself later. And that's the main goal we're getting to, is what we said when we started out with this episode, is when you're choosing your hard, you want to be able to ask yourself, will I thank myself later for the decision I'm making today? And even those little things, like I said, that one drink, it leads to alcoholism at some point, if it's not already. That one cigarette turns into a smoking habit. You know, eating those sweets turns into 20 pounds later. And it doesn't seem like it will in the moment, but it always does.
Look, bottom line is you got to be solution oriented. Stop living your life looking at the problems. I get there's moments when you got to lick your wounds. I get that there's moments when you got to take a step back and evaluate these decisions you're making, and are they providing the solution and the life that you dreamt of, that you want to have 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Stop wallowing in the self-pity of where you're at. I don't care what your situation is. You're not the only one that's ever had problems. Everybody had problems. The problems are going to define us one way or the other. Are they going to define you as a victim? Or are they going to define you as a warrior? Are you going to become powerful from them? Are you going to learn your lessons from them? The only way you do that is to be solution oriented and to look at the things that are happening around you and say, what can I learn from this? What can I take from this? How can I use this as rocket fuel for the rest of my life? And then make the decision that moves you in that direction so you could fulfill your power, potential, and purpose. So you could fulfill God's mission and purpose on your life. Don't deny yourself the life that you deserve because you're so afraid of the outcome that you don't know is going to happen one way or the other. There will be an outcome for your life. You get the choice to choose your heart and to lean all the way in to the outcome that's going to get you to the future that you can only imagine. And typically when you choose your heart, when you really choose that thing that you know is tough, the outcome ends up being better than you could have even dreamed of in the moment, because you can't see the vision for where you're going until you grow some more from the experiences that you've had. But when you grow from those experiences and you get to the other side of that and you actually see where you ended up based upon the hard choices that you made a year ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago, 10 years ago, it don't matter how long ago. When you see where you went based upon where you started, you can really sit back and be proud of yourself and know on your deathbed, I have maxed out my life, man. I have lived my life to the fullest potential, and I could rest my head easy and I could let my soul go to heaven so I could watch over the people that I love and the legacy that I built because I was willing to set the example for everybody else. Woo! You ever guys ever say that? Talk that, talk that, talk, Walt. That's what I just did right now. No, all right. So look, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. So if this episode resonated with you, like always, man, share and text it with somebody who could benefit from this message. The Legacy Warrior podcast doesn't grow without your help. We're doing this for you to help you, so you can help us help more yous by sharing this thing out. Make sure you're subscribed too. Get that auto download on there. Make sure every Tuesday you know it's coming to your your podcast, your preferred platform. You can come see me and Steph and the way we look at each other and banter, and we switch. You got the Blue Warrior shirt on today. I got the Yellow Warrior shirt on today. At YouTube, at Legacy Warrior Podcast. Go to our Instagram page, even Legacy Warrior Podcast, and tell us what you would like for us to talk about. Or hell, tell us that we be looking crazy when we're on camera. I don't even know. Tell us something. We love your feedback. We value your feedback, and it makes us feel incredible when we do. So we're going to keep choosing our hard. I hope you keep choosing your hard. And until the next time, stay in the arena of life, keep fighting, keep taking steps forward, and
leave this world a little bit better than you found it.
Let's go. Woo! See you next Tuesday.